Don't hire Indigenous people until you do this. Many companies are eager to hire Indigenous employees for a wide variety of reasons. Either they're motivated to hire Indigenous people to enhance diversity and inclusion, or they want to meet corporate responsibility goals, access untapped talent in a growing demographic, improve their brand reputation, or even foster economic development within Indigenous communities. Hi there, I'm Mallory, Anishinaabe from Oshkigamong, and I grew a fully Indigenous team at my company, and throughout my career I've worked with organizations and teams of all sizes from varying degrees of diversity makeup. And in this video, I'll share why not to hire Indigenous people until you do these 5 things. Plus at the end, I'll talk about the biggest risks of what could happen if you ignore some of these actions. Now, in today's diverse workplace, many companies are really excited and eager to hire Indigenous employees to enrich their teams and bring a variety of perspectives to their organization. However, hiring Indigenous employees requires a thoughtful approach that goes beyond just meeting diversity quotas or adding an Indigenous candidate's preferred to the job description. It's crucial for hiring managers to ensure their workplace is genuinely prepared to support Indigenous people effectively. So let's get into some of these actions. First, don't hire Indigenous people until you ask yourself why. Number 1, why are you hiring Indigenous employees? Before making any hiring decisions, it's important to ask yourself why specifically you're targeting Indigenous employees for your workforce. Are you trying to meet diversity targets set by your organization? Or do you genuinely believe that hiring Indigenous employees will bring invaluable perspectives and skills to your team? Clarifying your intentions can help you develop a more respectful and effective hiring process from start to finish. It's important that you can answer this question authentically. Now, I could say that your reasoning should reflect a commitment to benefiting from the diverse views and create a more inclusive and supportive environment that Indigenous cultures embody, but that might not be what comes to mind. If your primary motivation is meeting a diversity quota or hiring Indigenous community members, it may be better to reassess your approach. Instead, focus on the unique strengths and experiences that Indigenous employees can bring to your organization. So first, ask yourself why you're targeting Indigenous employees for your next candidate. Before you hire Indigenous employees, make sure that you assess your recruitment, hiring, onboarding, and retention process. Hiring Indigenous employees isn't just about extending offers. It's also about evaluating your existing recruitment, hiring, and onboarding and retention process internally to ensure that it is aligned with what an Indigenous employee's needs will be. Is your recruitment strategy inclusive? Does your job descriptions unintentionally alienate potential Indigenous candidates? It's important to ask these questions and ensure that your hiring practices are free from biases that could affect the decision-making process. Now, evaluate your onboarding process that you have in place right now. Does it provide adequate support for Indigenous employees to feel welcome and integrated into your team? If your team has substantial Indigenous presence already, you may have cultural training as part of your onboarding. And it's a good practice to not assume that Indigenous team members have already retained this knowledge or learned this knowledge in their communities. Assuming that they're knowledgeable about their culture is not a good idea. It's good to not assume that Indigenous candidates are already knowledgeable about their cultural practices. Your onboarding could include cultural awareness training, and this has been proven to improve retention rates and employee satisfaction, whether someone is Indigenous or non-Indigenous. The third consideration before hiring Indigenous employees is to understand the difference between lived experience versus not, or someone who is reconnecting, in other words. One of the key aspects of hiring Indigenous employees is understanding the difference between lived experience and reconnecting. Lived experience refers to an individual's direct experience with their culture, while reconnecting involves individuals who are in the process of rediscovering their cultural identity. Recognizing these distinctions is absolutely critical for respectful engagement and retention of Indigenous people on your team. Now, some Indigenous employees may have a deep connection with their culture, while others might still be exploring their roots. And both experiences are completely valid and valuable, and acknowledging them can foster a more supportive work environment. Lived experience doesn't mean that you had to grow up on the res or have attended residential school, but rather that you have lived your life outside of your work within the community and society of Indigenous people. Lived experience means that your community has impacted your values, norms, and the way you think, act, and see the world as an Indigenous person. Now, number 4, this is a really big one. Before you hire Indigenous people, evaluate your current workplace culture. Before welcoming Indigenous employees to your team, it's essential to look in the mirror, look at your team around you. What is the current workplace culture? What is the environment like? What level of cross-cultural competency does your organization have? Are your employees trained to interact respectfully and knowledgeably with colleagues from diverse backgrounds? One way to find this out is to ask your team what the culture is like. Ask how they feel about being part of the team environment and how they would describe it. If your organization lacks cultural competency, consider implementing training. This can improve understanding and respect for Indigenous cultures, no matter which part of the world the Indigenous culture you're referring to. Fostering a workplace where everyone feels valued and understood is crucial for successful integration of Indigenous employees, and it's also valuable for diversity of any background across the world. Now, before you hire Indigenous employees, the fifth important step to take is to understand the impact of hiring Indigenous employees will have on your existing team. When hiring Indigenous people, it's important to understand the broader impacts that Indigenous people can have on your organization. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people can bring very unique perspectives, drive innovation, and contribute to a richer workplace culture. However, our contributions can only be fully realized in a workplace that is equipped to support our needs. So there are also impacts that very high-performing Indigenous employees can have on your team that may not be suitable for what your company is looking for. Now, some of my closest friends and colleagues are very strong and resilient Indigenous leaders. These people have paved the way for younger generations, and it's absolutely incredible to have them in my life. They are exactly the way that they are because their journey has not been easy. They've had to challenge and push boundaries and norms for many teams and environments that they've been a part of. And in doing so, these Indigenous leaders have made many people uncomfortable along the way. People who didn't always welcome the changes that they were recommending or pushing for. So keep in mind that if you come across a strong and powerful Indigenous talent to join your team, it could potentially shake up the dynamic and disrupt the current normalities within your existing company. I'd encourage you to consider how hiring Indigenous employees can benefit your organization and how you can create an environment that allows them to thrive. This includes providing opportunities for career advancement, creating mentorship programs, and encouraging open dialogue about cultural differences. Now, hiring Indigenous employees without implementing the necessary support structures can lead to significant challenges in both the employee's position and the organization. So one major risk is the potential for cultural misunderstandings, which can create a sense of alienation or significant discomfort among Indigenous staff. Now, without proper training or awareness, existing employees may unintentionally perpetuate stereotypes or exclude Indigenous voices. This can lead to a very fragmented workplace culture. Now, plus, if Indigenous employees do not feel supported or valued, this can impact their job satisfaction and retention rates. Now, higher turnover not only disrupts team cohesion, but also represents a loss of valuable talent that you could have otherwise utilized in a really good way. So if you fail to create an inclusive environment, this can damage your organization's reputation and make it less attractive for potential employees and potential organizations or communities who value diversity and ethical practices to want to do business with you. So ultimately, without a concerted effort to foster an inclusive environment, the benefits of hiring Indigenous employees may be overshadowed by some of these risks. So take your actions and your plans seriously when you're considering hiring Indigenous people. So to sum it up, hiring Indigenous employees is an important step toward creating a more inclusive and diverse workforce, and is a big step for truth and reconciliation within Canada. It requires careful and genuine planning, though, to support these employees. So ask yourself why you're hiring Indigenous employees in the first place. Then assess your recruitment process and understanding the difference between lived experience and reconnecting individuals, and understand the broader impacts that these individuals can make on your teams, departments, and organization as a whole. You can then begin to take the steps to create an environment where Indigenous employees, team members, contractors, or even talent that you're working with on an individual project could thrive. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on this video. Which of the actions did you find most resonating with you and helpful to you? And which of the risks did you think are the biggest for team members and potential hiring managers to consider before they take action on these important initiatives? Shimigwech for watching. I thank you so much for supporting and commenting and spending your time with me on this channel. Hope you have an amazing day, and we'll see you next time.